So right now, Jewish people across the world are celebrating the festival of Sukkot, which literally means booths. It's as you can see in this picture, this is it's like a tent almost. It's a temporary dwelling place that Jewish people are commanded to dwell in for 7 days once a year at this time of year. And I want to talk to you a bit about the meaning of it and delve a little bit deeper and probe into some of the questions one might ask about this holiday, because found within it is so much beauty and wisdom and meaning that we can all learn from, I think, at the moment. So one of the big questions that comes up about this festival is that if you look at other festivals throughout the Jewish year, they all seem to be commemorating a particular moment or event. So Passover is the exodus from Egypt, Shavuot is the receiving of the Torah at Mount Sinai, Purim is the being saved from genocide in Persia from the evil Haman, Hanukkah is when the Maccabees fought off the Greeks. Yes, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur are more about some, spiritual events that are taking place. But even actually within them, with Rosh Hashanah, we have the commemoration of the creation of the world, creation of mankind in particular. And with Yom Kippur, there are some specific things that we know occurred on that day. We know that God forgave the Jewish people for the sin of the golden calf on that day. Various other things took place. And it's the day that every year God forgives us for our transgressions and errors over the year. But Sukkot is different. It doesn't seem to be taking us to one specific moment in time, one specific event. And I want to talk to you about why that is. At face value, what we're commemorating is the fact that we dwelled in these booths for 40 years as the Jewish people were in the desert in Egypt on their way to the Promised Land. But that's not one particular event, and it seems a bit curious. I mean, there's many things you could recall and remember about the exodus from Egypt. Why specifically the booths? And also, why is there no particular event that we're honing in on? That's question number one. Question number two, which is even more interesting and bizarre, is that there's actually even a debate over what it is that we're commemorating. See, the rabbis of the Talmud tell us that there's a debate over whether it's representing, number one, the fact that we dwelled in these booths and these huts, or number two, what's called Anani HaKavod, the divine clouds that hovered over us in the desert and actually guided us on our way and protected us from the elements and from danger. And so there's a debate over what's it actually commemorating, Sukkot. What are we celebrating and referencing on this holiday? So it's a little bit bizarre. Number one, there's no one particular event that we're commemorating on this holiday. And number two, we can't even decide what it is that we're commemorating. So I want to share with you a beautiful insight that I learned from Rabbi David Foreman, who's a wonderful rabbi in America. He said, let's have a look at what the Torah actually tells us about why we should commemorate and celebrate Sukkot. And it says, Lema'an, I'm giving you the text here below in the Hebrew, Lema'an yedu doreseichem ki basukos hashavti es b'nei Yisrael. In order that you should know, and your generations will know, that in sukkahs, in these booths, you dwelled, the children of Israel dwelled, Behotziosam me Eretz Mitzrayim, when they were leaving Egypt. Ani Hashem Elohechem, I am the Lord your God, or I, God, am yours, which is a more beautiful and personal way of putting it. And he's basically saying that, this is, do it because I'm asking you to do this, I'm commanding you to do this. But let's hear the specific thing. So it's telling us that we do this because we dwelled in sukkahs. We dwelled in these booths when we left Egypt. Ki basukos hoshavdi es b'nei Yisrael, when you left Egypt. Rabbi Foreman says, however, there's actually a fascinating way that you could read this, which is that it's not necessarily about something we dwelled in, or just about that, but it is actually taking us to a particular moment in time. Really? What could that be? Doesn't seem to mention any particular moment in time here. Well, he says that actually you could read this if you change the voweling of the letters, because don't forget that the Torah, while we have a tradition of how voweling is, you can read things. The Torah itself doesn't have vowels it just has the letters themselves. It doesn't have the punctuation, and therefore you can sometimes consider how one could read it without the voweling in different ways to give us deeper meanings at a different level. And if you read it differently as ki b'Sukkot hoshavti, if you read it as, in order that generations know that you dwelled in Sukkot when you left Egypt, maybe it's referring to a particular moment, particular place, that when we left Egypt, we went straight to dwell somewhere. Instead of saying you dwelled in booths, b'Sukkot, Sukkot is actually a place, as well as a name for booths. Sukkot, Sukkos, is a place that the Jewish people went to the night that they left Egypt. That's where they dwelled in that first night. When they were out in the desert, they went to a place called Sukkos. So maybe Rabbi Foreman was suggesting that what it's also telling us is that there is a particular moment that it's honing in on, that it's taking us to, which is that we should dwell in Sukkos because we dwelled in a place called Sukkos when we left Egypt on the very first night. Why would that be so significant? Well, if you think about it, there were two key things that we really left behind when we left Egypt. Other than all the terrible things, the slavery and the barbaric treatment from the Egyptians, two things that we actually see the Jews complaining about, the Hebrews complaining about and worrying about, which is a lack of food and shelter and protection from the elements. Food and shelter, they're the two basic human needs for physical survival. And they were the two things that we were leaving behind and fully entrusting ourselves to God in when we went into the desert. If you think about it, the two holidays that really sensitize ourselves specifically to that moment of Exodus, to the time when we left Egypt and went to the desert, are Passover and Sukkot. And think about it. Passover is thinking about things and focus on things from the perspective of food. That's when we eat the matzahs. That's when we can't eat chametz, leavened products. And then Sukkot is from the perspective of shelter. 6 months later, they're actually the furthest away from each other in the calendar, Sukkot and Pesach, Passover. And on Sukkot, what we do is we leave our homes and we're meant to have our meals, even sleep if you can, inside of these temporary huts, these temporary dwelling places. And I think what's going on here is that it's sensitizing ourselves to those two things that we really left behind and fully entrusted ourselves with God. See, just imagine that first night. Imagine that first night. Yes, we've left behind the slavery of Egypt, but at the same time, it's all we've ever known. It was all we ever knew was living in Egypt, Egyptian culture. And so it was scary. At the same time, imagine you suddenly go out into the desert, fully trusting of God. And imagine you're in these temporary huts, looking out at the night sky. You're meant to have the roof meant to be in such a way that you can actually see the sky above you. It's allowed to let rain in, to really sensitize ourselves to the fact that we were living in a very, on surface level, seemingly very precarious physical living situation. And that first night, in some ways, would have been the most perhaps unsettling in a way, because suddenly over 100 years of slavery and 100 years of living in Egypt, we suddenly throw behind, which yes, on the one hand is exciting, but on the other hand, we're now going out into the unknown. And so perhaps also Sukkot is sensitizing ourselves to that particular moment, that moment where we put our shelter, our security, fully in God's hands. And I think it has a huge amount of relevance for our time. We're meant to have this festival, Sukkot, at a time where the rabbis specifically chose that I think part of the reason why it was sanctioned to be at this time of year was because this was not particularly the warmest summer weather. We are meant to go into that tent sensing the vulnerability of our lives and our existence. But what's it trying to do? Yeah, we come out of Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur and we now feel cleansed, we now feel rejuvenated, and we go out into the sukkah, into this temporary dwelling hut, not to feel vulnerability in a negative sense, but to sensitize ourselves to realize that so much of life is fluid, is fragile, is unpredictable. In some ways, all of us are constantly in that desert. But the key thing is to remember there is a God who is guiding our lives, who is guiding us, who loves us, who wants the best for us, and who custom makes our blessings and our challenges all to help make this world and allow us to partner with him in making this world a good and godly one. And so we go into this temporary dwelling place at a time where, it might feel a little bit awkward and uncomfortable, to remind ourselves that, yes, life can get uncomfortable, and we shouldn't put our faith in the wrong kind of things, in false idols, in false sense of security, and to realize that ultimately our trust should be in God. It's a really beautiful thing, and that's why there is this debate among the rabbis over what are we representing. What is Sukkot really representing? What's it about? Is it the booths that we dwelled in, or is it the divine protection, the clouds of glory? And the rabbis are saying it's both, because just as we put ourselves in his hands, he too reciprocated by looking after us. He too protects us. Just as we put ourselves in his hands, he makes sure that we're looked after. In fact, it's the same thing with regards to Passover. We referred to it as Pesach because we celebrate what God did for us. He passed over the houses of the Israelites. But the Torah, God himself, when he talks about it, he calls it Chag HaMatzot, the festival of matzot. He focuses on what we did. We didn't allow the bread to rise because we were in a hurry. We fully put ourselves in God's hands, despite the discomfort. And he focuses on that. So we have this sort of reciprocal relationship. And that is what Sukkot is ultimately about. It's about saying that, yes, we accept that life can be challenging, it can be unpredictable, but you know what? The things that aren't unpredictable, the things that we do have confidence in, is our maker. And the fact that if we are here, no matter how things may look, no matter how comfortable or uncomfortable things may be, we know that ultimately it's all part of a necessary plan that God is guiding and looking after us with. If you've made it so far in this video, I have a request for you. JTV has been having a really big impact in spreading the truth about Israel and creating positive associations with the Jewish people, Judaism, and Israel. We've really grown a lot, particularly in the last year, and we're having a really significant impact, both for Jews and non-Jews. But I really want to take JTV to the next level so we can start to compete with the other big online media beasts that are often peddling anti-Israel content. And the way we're going to do that is to scale even faster. So I'd love to build a team where we have other presenters doing shows like me. Let's start doing documentaries, supplementary content, animated content, etc., etc. And to do that, I'd like to build a bit of a team. So what we're going to do is we're going to do one fundraising day, just one, where we try and build up some funding in order to fund such a team. Now, to do that, it's going to obviously require people to get involved. And I'm wondering if you would consider, if you're watching JTV content and appreciate what we do and want to help partner with us in taking this to the next level and spreading the truth farther and wider than ever before, I wonder if you'd consider partnering with us simply by running a mini page on the fundraiser that we do, where you just reach out to your contacts on that day that we choose to fundraise and see if they'll all chip in. If you'd be up for doing that, of which I would be so grateful, then please click on the Google form link in the video description of this video, where you can simply just put in a few contact details. It'll be a very small commitment, as I say, literally just one day that we'll all agree upon as a collective community. But the impact is going to be so big. There's such strength in numbers. If we all pull together and do this, we can take this to the next level. And as I say, all of us can partner together in bringing and spreading the truth to the whole world. So please do consider clicking on that link, filling in the form, and I'll be in touch very soon to talk about the next steps. Small commitment, but a big impact. Hi, thank you so much for watching. To watch another one, click here. To stay up to date with all our content, click here to subscribe. And if you're able to, you can help support JTV to grow and grow by clicking join below this video, where you can become a member and get perks including early access to videos and private live discussions with me. But most of all, you'll be partnering with us on our mission to change the world.